Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started. It's 1 minute after 1, and we have a lot of information to go over, and we want to get through it all. This is the virtual session of the Transition IEP workshop, and I know that we've got a lot more people that'll probably be jumping on. I see we got 38 on now, and I think we had close to 60 that were registered. So people might be jumping on as we go. Just an FYI, we're going to be recording this. So if there's something you want to hear again, it'll be available for later use, and it'll be on our website probably a week or two after hopefully we get it on there about a week or two after the session is over. My name's Dan Rounds, and I'm the coordinator of the Transition Services Liaison Project. And also with me today are 4 of our staff. Guys, if you don't mind, just go ahead and introduce yourself. And we'll just start with Maya. You want to start?
Well, thanks. I'm Maya Gillen. I am out of our Mitchell office, so I am more of the South Central region of our state, and I will have Steph introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Steph Badwound. I replaced Dave Halverson. I'm on the western side of the state. Go ahead, Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate Deedy. I am in the Aberdeen office, so I cover the northeast and north central parts of the state. And now on to Bev.
Sorry, wasn't wanting to unmute me. Maybe that's a sign. I shouldn't be speaking today. Hi, everybody. Bev Peterson. I work out of the Sioux Falls office. So I work with all the schools in the southeast region of the state. All right,
Okay.
Dan, back to you.
Thank you, gang. We'd really like to ask that during the session, you keep your camera or your microphone muted unless you have a question. That way we can make sure there's no background noise going on at wherever you're zooming in from. Also, we do encourage you to ask questions. One of the things about the questions though is to try to stay close to what we're talking about during this different sections of this. And if you have general questions about a particular student or something happening within your school district, to wait to the end and have a chat with your liaison, or even after it's over, and then you can contact your transition liaison to get further clarification. And, the liaisons are available for technical assistance at any time. Just send them an email or give them a phone call. On our tslp.org website. Our names are listed in there, our contact names, and our phone numbers and email addresses. So you can contact us that way. I think as we get started today, what we're going to do is basically cover, a little bit of information about the transition process and, for our high school students. Our students, and then we're going to go directly into then the indicator 13 requirements, and then maybe some best practices with those requirements, and we'll cover some topics related to the summary of performance, transfer of rights, and graduation, just so that you guys have some background on all of this information. So to get started, I guess we'd kind of like to know, in the chat box, if you wouldn't mind just typing in the number, where you're from and the number of years that you've been teaching in the area of high school transition. So why don't you go ahead and do that now, and then we'll kind of move into the next section. So just take a second and type in where you're from and how many years you've been teaching transition. And then Maya, if you don't mind going to the next slide.
So Dan, it looks like we have people anywhere from being brand new to 27 plus years. Holy cow. So we've got a really good group here.
And some folks who have lots of experience teaching, but maybe brand new to transition.
It just seems to be what's happening. A lot of teachers are kind of moving from elementary to high school and trying to pick up all the pieces here with what's related to transition. So we'll try to cover a lot of that information for you. And again, if there's something you want clarified or more information on, just contact one of us when we're done, or you can ask a question during the session. It works really good if you put it in the chat too. If you want to discuss something more thoroughly, put it in the chat and we'll try to address it for you. What our first slide that we're going to start with is, what does a quality transition plan look like? And what we'd really like you to do is just in the chat, now that you've kind of told us how many more years of teaching you have, what just your thoughts on what you think, in your opinion, makes a good transition plan. What is something that needs to be involved within the planning process that you think is important? And, the popular one, of course, is, just to give you an example, is to having the student attending the meeting and being involved in the meeting. What are some other ideas or opinions that you have on what makes a good transition plan? Love that one, starting early.
I was going to say, I love starting early, student-centered, realistic future goals, student input, focused on the student's interest and future. Communication, yeah. Community-based. I'm seeing a lot about involving the student, which is great. Course of study.
Okay, let's go to the next slide, Maya.
It's okay.
Thank you.
They haven't really, they're just asking questions.
Okay, the next slide is, what we do know, and we'll kind of follow up with that, is quality programs really do predict good outcomes for our youth. And family involvement is very important in this, starting early. How can you get families connected if they aren't involved? Families need to be informed of the events that we hold, the TSLP project holds each year, and we're always welcoming them to the events. We'd like to have parent involvement in everything that we do, student and parent involvement. Student involvement is critical. You guys, I think you all made that clear with your responses. Student-centered plan. Students need to be taught about the IEP process and how to be involved. We can't just expect them to come in and know exactly what's going on. They've got to be taught what it is and how it works and why there's a need for their involvement in the process. Ideally, they should be encouraged to start attending their IEPs before high school, so they're kind of used to the whole process. Teaching self-advocacy skills is critical, so they can use them when they're in the IEP meetings, and developing the IEP, the transition plan. Students can also be taught how to run or assist you in running the IEP meeting, which, kind of depending on where their ability is and, how far along you are with them, but The more involvement they have in that process, the better. Another thing that kind of aids in a good transition plan is a transition focused curriculum, so that, you know, their annual goals are related to, you know, something within their transition plan, and their activities are a part of that transition plan. These things will kind of help to keep the student engaged, so that, you know, not only are they, you know, going to classes, but they know why they're going to those classes. The teacher, school just can't do it by yourselves. And we know parent involvement is very important, but also that outside agency. I did notice some community involvement in the comments, including those, the Independent Living Center, your VR counselor, your benefit specialist, Department of Labor staff. They all could lend a help to a good transition plan, and we'll talk more about that later. The idea is to kind of make sure that these people are involved in the whole process, and they can not only help the student, but they can help you with it as you go along. Another thing to keep in mind is the evidence-based practices lead to improved student skills and good outcomes. Evidence-based practices is the conscientious use of current best evidence in making decisions about curriculum, self-advocacy, and work-based experiences. Evidence-based practices are specific interventions to teach skills to secondary students and are based on results of intervention and research. Predictors are any of three things that have been identified through research to be associated with improved post-school outcomes for students with disabilities. In a couple of minutes, we're going to talk more about the predictors of post-school success. You know, and we kind of want, you know, we're going to go through all of the compliance information that we can here today, but just doing compliance alone will not always improve outcomes. It's important that building relationships with your students, letting them know you care about them, believe in them, have high expectations for them. Those kind of things will go a long way in increasing student self-confidence, feeling valued. Then they can learn the skills needed for working and living as independently as possible. Thanks, Maya. According to the IDEA federal regulations, transition is a results-oriented process that is focused on improving the academic and functional achievement of the student to facilitate their movement from school to post-school activities. So it's not just the academic section of you know, working with the student, but it's also their functional achievements. And those are kind of the transition related areas. The idea is that beginning at age 15 or earlier, and we're probably going to talk quite a bit about that today, was when is a good time to start transition. Even though the law says at age 16 we need to have transition in place, it goes a long way to be starting at the age of 14 or in the 8th grade. The IEP team should develop a long-range plan at that point from school to adult life. The process starts with assessing. So if you look at the top, we're going to assess the student to determine their strengths, their needs, their preferences, and their interests. Then we're going to assist the student to develop their vision or goal for the future. So based on the information we get, then we want to make sure that we're kind of helping them to put together, based on those strengths and interests and their vision for the future, kind of develop a plan on how we can get there. Then we can develop the IEP. The IEP is basically based on those two things, their vision and kind of what the assessment results are. Then we can develop the IEP, or after we develop the IEP, then we can implement the IEP and then evaluate the results. In other words, go back and look to see what took place. The IEP is a working document. You guys all know it's something that you put together, but even during the year, you know, there's some adjustments that need to be made. So when you have your next meeting, you can adjust it and rewrite the IEP so that it makes more sense for the next year. Okay, post-school predictors of post-school success. I alluded to this just a little bit ago. On the NTAC website, which is down at the bottom of this slide, it's transitionta.org. And at that website, you can find more information on predictors of post-school success. Predictors. But this slide kind of shows a little bit of the information in regard to what they share on their website. But effective practices are specific interventions to teach skills to secondary schools and are based on results of intervention research. Practices have been evaluated regarding the amount, type, and quality of research conducted. They are labeled as one of the following. So they could be evidence-based, demonstrate a strong record of success for improving outcomes using rigorous research designs, and adheres to the indicators of quality research, which is really the best one. Research-based, when they're just research-based, it demonstrates a sufficient record of success of improving outcomes. Again, it uses rigorous research designs and may adhere to the indicators of quality research. Promising practices demonstrate some success for improving outcomes, but more quality research is needed to raise to the next level. Predictors are any of these three things that have been identified through research to be associated with improved post-school outcomes for students with disabilities. And, just, thinking about it, if we can go to the next slide, just thinking about, do you do any of these kind of things within your school district? With career awareness, community experiences for your youth, exit exam requirements, goal setting, inclusion in general education, interagency collaboration, paid work experience is another one. If you notice where, even within the different context of, education, employment, or independent living, if there's an X there, then you know that there's evidence that it's going to affect all three of those areas. But these are all predictors of post-school success. If you're doing some of these things, there's a better likelihood of the student having a good post-school outcome versus not doing these things. We, of course, pay a lot of attention to the paid employment or work experience while a student is in high school. And we found that, students that actually do a work experience are twice as likely, and I've heard higher numbers than that, to have a job when they get out of high school. Another one, having a good transition program. If you include career and technical education within your curriculum. So again, these are the predictors of post-school success. And if you go to the transitionta.org website, they have a lot more information on this, but it's something to kind of look at and see what you're doing in your school, and if it's something that might relate to what you're doing, it's going to predict better outcomes for your students. Okay. Go to the next one. And I don't know, Beth, are you on? If Beth is on, I'd like to introduce Beth to our group here.
I am here.
Hi, Beth. Beth
Hello.
Schultz has been our contact person with the Office of Special Education Programs with the state office. And anyway, Beth, do you mind just touching on this piece? You do such a nice job of explaining it.
Sure. So indicator 14 is that post-school exeter response. So 1 year after the students leave high school, they get a phone call asking what they're actually doing once they leave high school. Did they go to college? Did they work competitively for a certain amount of time? Did they get some other kind of training? How are they engaged after high school? And that's what we want to know, because a good transition plan those students then are engaged after high school. They're not just at home doing nothing. And that's really what we want, is we want them engaged in something. So in 2020, this was our response rate. And as you can see, we had a high component of the students that were competitively employed, but we also had 23% that were not engaged at all. Now remember, 2020 Exeters, that's when COVID hit too. So this year, these are the students that were interviewed or surveyed in 2021, the 2020 Exeters. And I think we had a really low number of students that responded to that survey. I think it was like 169, whereas most of the time we have well over 200 and closer to 300, and that's where we want to be. We have between 700 and 800 students that leave high school every year. And so we want them to be more in these others. We want this light blue to be less. On the next slide, please. So if you can see, this year we had a bigger majority that were in the competitive employment, and there were some that were in the higher education. In other words, they went to college or to a technical school. But notice, last time we looked, it was 23%. This time it was 18%. So that did drop by 5%, which was great. In the 2020 Exeters, which we were surveyed in 2022, we had over 200. We had close to 269, so 100 more respondents. And so that's maybe why our data even looks a little better. We do ask districts to help us call those students, volunteer to help call your students, because now in the day of cell phones, how many of you don't answer your cell phone if you don't recognize the number? So if a student recognizes the number or a family member recognizes the number, they're more apt to answer the phone and to respond to that survey. Another thing we've been asking the districts to do is, before that student leaves high school, show them the survey. There's a link to it on the Post-School Outcomes website that you can actually look at that survey and go over with it so that they know what questions are going to be asked when they get that phone call. We've also asked the districts to print a postcard. We have a postcard available that the students can put their name and address on, and then you can send that postcard to them in the spring before they're going to get that survey, to remind them that, hey, remember, we talked about this survey, and remember, somebody's going to call you between now and first part of September. And when they call you, please answer the questions. And again, it can be either the student or maybe a family member that knows them. Every district should have a unique login and password to that Post-School Outcomes website. And if you need information on how to do that, you can actually contact Lori Kwasniewski. She's the new transition person at the state level. Or you could email me too, and I would forward your information to her. If you have any questions, let me know.
So Beth, I think currently the state contracts with someone,
Right.
an or Black Hills State University, right?
So every
to do
student
these
does get a
surveys?
call, but it's like a cold call. And so how many times, if you see a number you don't recognize, or an area code, or a first 3 digits number that you don't recognize, you're probably not going to answer that call.
Right. But so if a school district is interested in contacting their own students, though, they would need to contact you or Lori, right?
Right.
In order to get that going.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Thanks, Beth. And I think
Yep.
one more thing, since we have you on, if you don't mind, a little bit about the new sign-in sheet to get professional development, if you don't mind. And then I know that at the end of our session today, we're going to give them a code so that they can get their credit for today. But do you mind going over the new system real briefly for us? Thanks.
Sure. So the new system is called Canvas. It's our new learning professional development platform. And many of you had signed up through Go Sign Me Up. And so we registered you for this course. But before you can get into the Canvas system, you had to create a MySD account. And what that is I don't know how many of you have gotten fishing license or have registered for camping spots at the campgrounds. You have to have that MySD account. But you're going to have a second MySD account for your school email. Okay, so you have to go onto our website and click on that link to get a MySD account. Because what this does is the single, what we call a single sign-on, and it's a way of making sure that it's you and your email that is actually signing on, making it a more secure website. Once you get in there, you're going to see on the left-hand side, it's going to say something like home and modules and a couple of other things. If you click on modules, then you're going to click on, there's going to be a section in there that's going to say exit ticket. And you're going to click on that. And that's where you're going to answer the couple of questions in order to get your CECHs. Anytime you register for class that has CECHs, it will save all of your certificates in this website. When you get ready to renew your certificate and need those CECH certificates, you're going to be able to download them from this site and then upload them into the new certification website. If you're having trouble with any of that, email me, because I can send you some screenshots of what that looks like and how to get those CECHs. But you do need to do it through the system.
Thanks, Beth.
You're welcome.
I'm going to turn it over to Maya, and Maya, you can take off from here.
All right, so we're going to kind of talk about the different things that we put on, as well as a couple of other agencies throughout the state that deal with transition. So if you guys just want to put in the chat, I'm after the next slide, what your students have participated in, and then also if you've not heard of any of these, we can go over them as well. So Catch the College Wave, it used to be called Catch the Wave. We just changed that name this year, so people know kind of what it's gearing more toward. And then there's also Project Skills and Project Search, which is through Voc Rehab. And then there are the 18 to 21 programs throughout the state, YLF, or the Youth Leadership Forum. And then there's self-advocacy trainings, and then Let's Talk Work. So if you guys just want to put in the chat again, if any of your students have participated in any of these activities, that would be wonderful. Well, it looks like we're already getting quite a few coming in, and it looks like quite a few of you guys have participated or had your students participate in quite a few. It looks like a lot of Project Skills and YLF, so that's great to see. And also, speaking of YLF, we did just put our applications for both the team leads, assistant team leads, and delegates on our website, www.tslp.org. So make sure that you tell your students about those so they can submit their application and hopefully come this upcoming year.
And I think it's important to note too with that, thanks for sharing it. These are our online application this year.
Oh,
So yes, it can all be completed right on the computer. And I believe it can only be, in one setting. So if, it might be good to go look at what's on the application and then, look it all over so that when they sit down to actually complete it, that they have all the information that they need when they do go to complete it. If people need a paper copy of the application because they don't have access to a computer, then they can contact one of the liaisons or the liaison in your area, and they'll get you a paper copy if that's needed. We're trying to get most all of this information done online because it makes the process a lot smoother for us on our end. So kind of get rid of the mail system and go to the electronic system. So thanks, Maya, for bringing that up.
No, thank you, Dan. I appreciate that.
And if I could just clarify, I think, Dan, you said it has to be done or should be done all in one setting. It doesn't have to be done all in one setting. You actually have 30 days. It will save your document for 30 days, but you need to, if you don't get it all done in one setting, you need to log back in on the same device that you started it on, and it will be there for 30 days. But then you need to have it completed by then. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Beth. This is a whole new process to us, so I appreciate you guys chiming in there. And then Bev, I will actually have you take it away for our next slide.
Okay, so we are going to spend a good share of the rest of our time here talking about the indicator 13 requirements. So indicator 13 is one of 17 indicators that all states have to report data to the Federal Office of Special Education Programs office. So the state office gets their data from you, the individual school districts, each year. So indicator 13 is one of 5 indicators that are actually compliance indicators, which means 100% compliance is expected. I'm not sure how we got so lucky that ours is one of the 100% compliance required, but we certainly have to work continuously at this to try to achieve that. We have gotten close to 100% in the past. We've kind of dipped valleys and hills here that we've done better some years than others, but it's something that we all want to work towards all the time. So if your school is being reviewed by the state office of special education programs office this year or in the future, the TSLP staff, we are part of that state review team that comes to your school and looks at files. And we will have our indicator 13 checklist, which was one of the documents that was recommended that you have available with you for this training. And that is the actual document that we use when we come and need to record how you did in all of these areas. So there's 8 specific questions, and we have to answer the question based on is this a yes or no in the area of employment, a yes or no in the area of further education or training, and a yes or no in the area of independent living. So I'm not going to read this all. We are actually going to cover all of these areas, the 8 specific areas. Okay. So the very first area, or it's number 1 on our indicator 13 checklist anyway, so that's what we're going by, is the area of age appropriate transition assessment. So we all know that we have to have a transition plan developed by the time the student is 16. And the very first step in that process then is to have an assessment done or do some assessments on that student. And what we're trying to do is gathering as much information as we can about the student's strengths, preferences, their interests and needs in these 3 areas specifically: employment and either further education or training, and in the area of independent living skills. So you have to do an assessment at the beginning of the transition planning assessment or transition planning period, excuse me, and you have to write a written assessment report, just like you do with your academic assessments. And on that report, we'd like to see some specific strengths in the areas of each in employment, education, and independent living, as well as some need areas. So with that report, it has to be, part of the student's file. The parents should be given that information as well. And then that is what the team uses to have a discussion, basically, at the person's IEP meeting. So there are many, many different kinds of assessments that can be used, and I'll get into that in a minute. You're going to be using the information from your assessment based on, what the student's strengths are, what their needs are, what their interests are. That is what you will use for the crux of your conversation for the whole meeting, really, based on what he or she said she would like to do or wants to do. And then you're going to be talking about, okay, well, where is that student's ability level right now? And how much of a gap is there between where they'd like to be or where they say they want to be and where they're at right now? And then how are we going to address that gap? One thing that's, fairly new in the last, I guess it's been a few years ago, was the whole issue about getting consent for transition assessment. we have had further clarification, and so now we know that you don't need parent consent to do transition assessment specifically in those off years. When parent consent is required for assessing is when it's part of an initial evaluation or part of a 3-year evaluation. You have to get consent to do that. In those other years, those in-between years, I guess sometimes we call them, it's not required, but it would be considered best practice. So if you've been doing that every year, certainly you can continue to do that. I just wanted to make sure everybody is aware of that. Okay, next slide. So there are, as I mentioned a minute ago, literally hundreds of different types of assessment. The state does not, you know, say this is what you must do for transition assessment, just as they don't with any others. We have a list of a lot of different examples of transition assessments actually on our website, and actually this list is taken from there. But please don't think that these are the only assessments that you can do for students with mild disabilities or more significant ones. This is just the tip of the iceberg. But so these are some of the more common ones, I think, that we typically see when we go to schools. The Career Clusters Interest Survey, I think, is a great one. And I might have Maya point that out on our website here in a minute, but the TPI, that stands for Transition Planning Inventory, and then -3, it's in its 3rd edition at this point, using the SD My Life information assessment that's done. And if you're not familiar with that, typically it's a school counselor that I guess is the administrator of that, but it has a lot of great information that you can use as a team. And so that's another point, is with the transition assessment, it doesn't just have to be an assessment that you as the SPED teacher, you know, does with the student. Think about, again, you know, what the student's interests are, what other kind of assessments are being done with that student. As the ASVAB, for example, if a student's interested in going, you know, into the military, that's an assessment that has to be done. That could provide the team some good information regarding their strengths and interest as well. And then, yes, we also have some listed under for students maybe with some more significant needs. Other assessments might work better for you to get that information. But really the bottom line with transition assessments is you want to, from the assessment, you should get a pretty good picture of what that student's strengths and needs are. If you've done an assessment and you look at it and think, well, this really doesn't tell me a lot, that would be a clue or a red flag that maybe you need to do additional assessments. You can do numerous assessments, but at the minimum, the assessment should be able to give the team a pretty good picture of their strengths and needs in those 3 main transition areas of employment, independent living, and further education or training. Let's see. So yeah, Maya, would you be able to open our website, which, hey, by the way, we can kind of show it off. Our website has a new look to it.
Okay, I just have to figure out how to reshare my screen. I'm sorry, guys. I'm
okay.
the worst tech savvy person ever, but here we are.
Okay.
So
So yeah, I think this has just been in the last like week or two that we have a new look to it. But if you click on Transition IEP at the top, and then we're going to scroll down to transition assessments. And as you can see here, we have a long list, and each one of these are, you know, a clickable link that you can click on and actually will take you to it. And we have them divided in, you know, under the transition areas of employment, education, training, independent living. So, you know, I had just done this right before Maya, would you go to, under that very first one, self-determination advocacy, the one that says interests and preferences, I think it was, yeah. And I think that's the career, that career cluster inventory, oh, maybe not, okay. Interest survey, but there's just some really cool things in here. I was just clicking through them before we started this afternoon. And I think you'll see that if you bring, there we
Is this the
go.
one you were looking for,
Yes,
Bev?
this is the one I was thinking of. Thank you. Career
There you go.
clusters, interest inventory that asks, you know, just lots of questions. And then down on the second or third page, I think it puts some, yep, keep going. There we go. Here, the 16 career clusters explains them. And then I think, you know, as you score it, it will show kind of what cluster area or two, maybe that the student, depending on how they answered those questions, what they might score the highest in. So that, I mean, that's just one example. There's just literally hundreds of assessments out there. So we also have, if you can go back, yeah, Maya, can you find where we have something called guidance and suggestions on age appropriate transition assessment. That was a document that we put together. There you go. Yep. That we hand this out a lot. I take this with me whenever I'm talking with teachers. So these are just some of the more common ones, the ones that we see done pretty frequently in the school districts in our state, but none of these, we're not saying that, you know, you have to do this one or this one, but we just get a lot of questions from teachers on, well, you know, what do you recommend for transition assessment? So I think you just have to, you know, try a few of them and see which ones that you feel give you guys and the team the best information about the student. If you guys wouldn't mind, why don't you write in the chat box, if you would, like what assessments you've used that you really like and why, you know, why do you use that assessment? That would be great, because that's often times the questions that we get as well. But please also take time to check out our website if you haven't had a chance. It seems to me, I think the rest of you, Maya, Kate, you can, Steph and Dan, if you agree or not, but the ones we see a lot, or that I see a lot, are that the TRS, which stands for Transition Rating Scale, which has replaced the ESTR, or the Enderle-Severson Transition Rating Scale. So it's just a new name, basically. From what I'm hearing from some teachers is the actual assessment hasn't changed a whole lot. So we're seeing it here in the comments as well, a whole lot of TRSs and the TPI-3. Yep. So again, whatever you find and feel comfortable with, if you feel that it is giving you and the team enough information, because this is what you use to build the student's transition plan on, really. So does anyone have any questions about transition assessment? You can either unmute and ask, or you could put it in the chat box. If not, I will turn it over to, let's see, Kate, I think is going to talk about the next one.
Yeah. So I am going to share about appropriate measurable post-secondary goals, or your MPSGs. I normally just call them post-secondary goals because I trip over the anagram there. Every student on an IEP must have a measurable post-secondary goal statement in employment and education, or in employment, education or training, and independent living when appropriate. So you need to be assessing that independent living area. And if you see needs in independent living, you should be addressing them on the IEP. that's what we'll be looking for. In order for those to be measurable, I skipped one, sorry, they're based on that age appropriate transition assessment. I apologize, my eyes are all watery because of allergies and everything's blurry for me. But they're based on the assessment that we just talked about. You look at that and you figure out what that student wants to do after they're done with their public school system. Are they going to move on to college? Are they going to go directly into employment? What supports are they going to need to live independently? That kind of stuff. In order to be measurable, you need to use will statements, and it's very easy to slip into Sarah would like to be a hairdresser. Johnny would like to live on his own. Will. And I know sometimes parents bristle at that, and I will tell you, I was one of those parents. My oldest child has autism, and I went to his first transition IEP, and they showed me the transition section. I will work as a cashier in a restaurant. And I said, oh, no, he won't. It's measurable if we use will, but this is why we update these things. What might be true today may not be true in a year. So that will statement, Robert will be a cashier at a restaurant. That's measurable. So that's why we use those will statements. Post-secondary means after high school, after an 18 to 21 program, if that's appropriate for the student. I know some teachers have said, well, Project Search feels like it's post-secondary. It might feel like it is, but that student is still a part of your school district. So a Project Search program or an 18 to 21 program, like Augie Access, Wesleyan Quest, that is not post-secondary. That would not be what we were looking for. We'd be looking for what does that student want to do after they're done with your school district in those areas: employment, education or training, and then independent living. Next one. So here are just some examples. So in employment, which is required for all students of transition age on an IEP, I will work full-time as an electrician. Education or training, I will enroll at Mitchell Technical College to obtain a degree in electrical construction and maintenance. Training, maybe there's further training to go into. After obtaining my associate's degree, I will obtain on-the-job training through my apprenticeship. Now I'm going to stop here for a second because I know with those students who have a little bit higher need, there has always been a question about what do we put for education and training if they're not going to go on to a post-secondary program like a technical college or a university. We all receive on-the-job training. I don't care how many degrees and how many initials you have behind your name. When you start a new job, you get on-the-job training. And when you start a new job as a stocker in a grocery store, you get on-the-job training. When you start a job as a teacher or as a transition liaison, so everyone gets on-the-job training. Independent living, we talked about where that's appropriate. If that student has needs in that area, this goal is an example of that. I will live in an apartment off campus with a roommate and receive assistance with money management and cooking. Whatever is appropriate for that student. Is it okay to have more than one career in that employment area? Absolutely. Maybe that student hasn't decided yet. And we're starting this, remember, we're starting before this student is 16. So that is in place on their 16th birthday. They might not know yet. So maybe the student is thinking about working as an electrician, but also might want to work in another industry. Maybe they're interested in welding. Maybe they're interested in driving truck. It is okay. I will work full-time as an electrician or as an over-the-road truck driver. That is absolutely okay. Each year, as we update these things, it can start out kind of vague. I would like to work in building trades. I would like to work in a grocery store. And then we should be getting more and more specific as they're getting older and we get more information about their goals. They get more experience and maybe change their minds. It should be more focused and specific as the student gets older. Any questions on measurable post-secondary goals? So we kind of touched on this a little bit. For those students with significant needs, we're going to be wanting to look at high yet realistic expectations. And so maybe an employment goal for someone is to work in a grocery store or to do janitorial work, but they're not quite there yet. You know, let's set some goals, talk with that student, see what they're interested in, and set that goal for them. Every year it needs to be updated, and we should be seeing some forward movement, not just a dead end, you know, I'll finish high school and that's the end of it. Let's have a goal and start working toward that. And you can absolutely incorporate external supports, especially in independent living. Often I will see goals that include, I will live in a supervised apartment with a direct service personnel assisting me, things like that. Get information from the parents and caregivers to help determine what that student's needs are and what they might be interested in. And then the next slide. Think about this for all your students. Is the goal appropriate or realistic for the student? When I first came on to TSLP a little more than a year ago, one of the first things I did was watch Bev and Maya present an IEP workshop, and I had to laugh at the example of I want to play for the Minnesota Vikings, because prior to this I worked as a family support coordinator, so kind of a case manager for some folks, and a young man had decided he was done with school. His friends had graduated. He could have still remained in school for a couple of years, but he and his family chose to finish his school career. And he called me up one day and he said, Kate, now I want you to set me up a tryout with the Minnesota Vikings. This is a young man who had never played football before in his life. So we talked about it. I asked him some questions. I said, well, why do you want to be with the Minnesota Vikings? Well, I like watching football. I like sports. We talked about other things, why he would like that. And at the end, we kind of boiled it down to, he was okay maybe working in a store where he got to sell sports equipment or sports clothing. One teacher told me about a young lady who said she wanted to be a teacher, but unfortunately did not have the academic skills to move on to college to get her teaching degree. So the questions were asked, why do you want to teach? Well, I want to be in charge. I want to boss people around. So they found other options for her that would better reflect her skills. So it's often about a conversation and just having that sit down and talking about it and questioning getting down to the core of what they really want out of that. So then you're looking at, does the school goal reflect a student's interests and preferences? You know, he might not be able to play for the Minnesota Vikings, but he's interested in sporting goods. How can we get him involved in sporting goods? Was the information from the age-appropriate transition assessment used to determine the goal? That's the starting point. That is where you begin. All the conversations is off of that assessment. So use that transition assessment to guide the conversation, talk to the student and the family and other people who are involved in the young person's life. Maybe the VR counselor, maybe there's a job coach. Are those schools real? What types of skills are needed to get to that goal that the student wants to reach? Can the student acquire those skills? If so, what classes do we need to be thinking about that student taking? List out all those courses that need to be taken for that career choice. Are they aiming at a college degree? Are they aiming at a technical college? What classes can they take now that would help them move directly into employment? Have the student interview an individual in the particular career they want to go into to get, really what's going on. Another teacher talked about a young man who wanted to go into welding, but didn't quite understand everything that welding entailed. So even though he was not going to be able to run the actual welder, there were so many different things he could do in that career area. And talking to the welding instructor at their school led to a whole different career path for him. So the next slide. Measurable post-secondary goals should be shared right at the beginning of the IEP process. That's where you're heading to. That all of those measurable post-secondary goals, where do they want to work? What education and training are they going to need? What help am I going to need to live on my own? Or what help am I going to need for my independent living? That should start the conversation, because everything in that IEP should be aiming right at those goals. You should keep the students' goals in mind, and the team talks about his strengths and interests to determine if it's realistic. Think about team members who are at the meeting who are from outside the school. Who can you bring in to assist with this? Is it voc rehab? Is it independent living sources? Think about that. What does the student need to know up front about what their dreams and goals are and what they need to get to it? If there seems to be a big gap between those measurable post-secondary goals and their ability levels, like we talked about, ask questions. Number 3, the third area under indicator 13 is that the post-secondary goals need to be updated annually. Sometimes the students have landed on something early and they stick with that, but you should be having those conversations, because often it does change. Even for students who are not on IEPs, if you ask them when they're 14, 15, 16 years old, what they want to do for a career and what they end up doing in the end, it's often different things. Shoot, even when you get out of college, sometimes you change that career. So we need to be updating this information annually. Involve that student. Talk to the parents, talk to those outside agencies who are working with that student to see where they're at on the goal that they originally stated and how you need to change that. And each year they should become more specific. At first, it's going to be pretty broad. Then you need to dial it down and be more specific each year. Talk to their voc rehab counselor. If they're working with the Department of Labor, have them come in to those meetings and talk to the students and the parents about what they're doing and where they need to go next. Any questions to this point? Okay, then it's time to do our first group activity. So we have 3 scenarios today, and we'll get through hopefully all 3. Well, I think we're sitting pretty. And so we're going to be thinking about, when we read these scenarios, what transition assessments we'll need, if there are more we need, and what measurable post-secondary goals we have. So the first scenario, I will read it out loud real quickly. I gotta take my glasses off so I can see mine. Scenario number 1, Chris is a 15-year-old 8th grader. He has an emotional disability. He has verbally aggressive and disruptive behaviors directed toward his peers and his teachers. When Chris is not creating or completing hands-on activities, his behaviors begin to escalate. He works well in one-on-one situations with male teachers, has strong listening comprehension skills, strong basic math skills, and understands how robotics works. He utilizes all mechanical tools, but he has difficulty with reading fluency and comprehension. He prefers concrete mathematic tasks, has periods of frustration, dislikes reading and lectures, and does not accept criticism. Chris's preferences are making new robots and being left alone to create them. He does not like school, so he is not interested in further schooling. So when we think about transition assessments, you can either unmute yourself and call out, or you could type into the chat box, what transition assessments do you think you would look at with this student? What areas are we going to assess? We're going to assess employment, education and training, and independent living, right? What would we do that with? Some of the tests we've already mentioned, of course. My Life, to narrow down his interests. South Dakota My Life. Mhm. Any other ideas? A survey of some sort? Career clusters?
The pics.
Expose them to some new ideas, yes. South Dakota My Life.
Those are all great examples. Something I just thought of is the fact that he's an 8th grade, he's 15 years old. So he's just beginning this transition process. We actually have to do an assessment or combination of assessments that will cover strengths and needs in all of his areas. So you guys have got a great list here of like vocational interests and career interests. But don't forget, we also would have to assess him in the area of independent living too.
When looking at measurable post-secondary goals, and yep, Chris is just starting out, what do you think some of those might look like? We'll start with employment. What could he possibly be interested in? He doesn't want to go to school anymore after high school. What could he use his skills he already has to do that he might be interested in? And of course, when we would do those assessments, hopefully it would narrow it down. Might be good to talk to someone in robotics to motivate him in all other areas and give him career ideas. Good. Possible to work as a cashier in an auto parts store. Assembly, that's an idea. If he works on robots, maybe he would like to, work on, small engines and electronics. And we don't have a lot of information about Chris. Obviously, we do need a lot more information on him. So yeah, determination of post-secondary goal survey completed by parents. So let's say he wants to go into assembly. The way we could write his employment goal, I will work in assembly, in an assembly plant. And as he would get older, possibly he wants to work in, at 3M or at Daktronics. And that would be more specific each year. Should we move on to scenario 2 and see what we've got going on there? So scenario 2, I can actually read this one off the screen. I got too much stuff on my screen. Kendra is an 18-year-old student with autism. She is currently a junior. She freely asks questions and is willing to share information, especially about history-related topics. She is in all regular education courses, but needs assistance to focus on information in which she is not interested, to prepare written assignments, and to improve social skills, especially when to share information. Kendra performs independent living tasks at home through chores and has a job. She manages the money from her job to pay for her cell phone, gas for her car, and for her clothing. In the past, she participated in a dig activity at the Hot Springs Mammoth site. She is not interested in dinosaurs and prefers anthropology and historical digs focusing on civilizations. Kendra's preferences would be to work at an archaeological dig site. Her team feels becoming a history teacher would give her a more stable job. Kendra is unsure where to attend college and what paperwork is required. Kendra's performance, abilities, and experiences were assessed using the TAG. Her scores indicate her greatest strengths are in the areas of disability awareness, employment, persistence, and student involvement in the IEP. TAG, I didn't fix that, that's my typo. TAG scores indicate the greatest needs are in the areas of goal setting and attainment, with additional needs in the areas of interacting with others, strengths and limitations, and supporting community or adult agencies. So we have a little bit more information about Kendra because we know what she got on that tag, but do we need more information? what other checklists or interviews or transition assessment would you look at for Kendra? Do you think we have all the information we need to know about her? And like I say, you can unmute yourself too and call out. Don't be shy.
And I'll just throw out there, in case you're wondering what TAG is, it stands for Transition Assessment and Goal Generator. And that is, I know it's part of the list on that document that we have on the website, guidance and suggestions for age appropriate transition assessment. So if you're interested in that one, you can check that out as well.
Mhm. I know that's not one I have seen a whole lot, but it
I'm
is one of
fairly
the
new.
options out there.
I apologize. This is Desi. I'm fairly new to the transition process, but one thing that stands out to me is in the areas of interacting with others. She really wants to be a teacher. She's going to need self-advocacy, and she's going to need some social skills in a working environment such as a school, so that she learns how to communicate with others, and especially the kids.
And I like one thing you said, if she wants to be a teacher. Because the team feels becoming a teacher would be good for her, but we don't know how Kendra feels about that.
Maybe she would be suited for being a tour guide at the Mammoth site, and teaching people how to do the archaeological digs.
Yeah. So definitely some career exploration there to figure out, what does she really want to do?
Yeah.
And what is a realistic goal for her? Good.
And it kind of goes back to Kate, what you mentioned before when you were talking about measurable post-secondary goal statements, is don't be afraid to ask questions. Ask oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. Tell me why you're interested in being a teacher. Well, my mom's a teacher. Okay, that's great, but let's talk about some of the requirements and some of the skill sets that would be good to have if we want to be a teacher, those kind of things. So it's just amazing the information you'll get if you just start asking a simple question like why, and you'll get probably a lot more information from that student.
Yep. Don Graham said maybe set up some job shadowing experience in different areas so she can make more informed decisions. That's a really good idea. Looking at those folks in real life, doing their jobs. So if Kendra decided to be a teacher, if she's on board with that, because we don't know, this scenario just tells us the team feels that's okay. How would we write her measurable post-secondary goal for education? Or for employment? Anybody want to chime up how you would write that? I'll give you guys a couple of seconds to type. So if that is what she wanted to do, and that's what your team came down on, that she wants to be a teacher, the employment goal would simply be, yep, exactly. I will become a history teacher. I will be a history teacher. And then you'd go from there. What training or education is she going to need? I will attend a four-year university. Good. And use those will statements. That's good.
And I like how someone started their statement after high school, comma, I will become a history teacher. We used to make that suggestion that's how you start out your statement, because it would hopefully will help you remember that, okay, I don't want to put anything in here that isn't after high school or after aging out. So that's great too.
For example, we would not want to see, I will go to Augie Access, or I will go to an 18 to 21 program. We would not want to see that, because that is not post-secondary. But yep, she might want to be a paraprofessional in a history class. That might be a good idea too. Excellent. All right, let's move on to our final scenario.
And Kate, just one last thing too. This is also
Yeah.
a really good example where you could have an or statement when it comes to her MPSG, in case she doesn't know if she really wants to be, you know, an anthropologist or if she wants to be a teacher. She could have an or statement here.
True.
Until
I
she-
will be an anthropologist or a history teacher. True. So that goes back to, can we have more than one career in that goal? Yes. Now, should at 18, although she's a sophomore, we're probably wanting to start narrowing it down at that point. But
Absolutely.
so scenario 3, we have Chaz. He is a 17-year-old sophomore eligible for special education services under the category of cognitive disability. He is a quiet young man and displays appropriate social skills around others. He can also follow directions and stay on tasks if tasks are broken down for him. At home, Chaz will take out the garbage, make the bed, unload the dishwasher, and other tasks with prompts. According to an independent living assessment, Chaz will need support in budgeting, independently completing household chores, health and safety for himself, and making and voicing his own choices. He has a lot of goals, but does not understand the steps needed to meet these goals. He loves theme park rides and activities. Chaz's preference would be to work at a theme park so he can experience different rides, tell people about the rides, and help others. He also enjoys being outside, but requires frequent water breaks. He prefers to be in air conditioning when it's hot outside. He does not have a driver's license and relies on others for transportation. So do we need to know more about Chaz's strengths, needs, preferences? Would you give him more assessment? And if so, what do you think you would want to know about Chaz? Anybody have any opinions on that? And he wants to work at a theme park, but what if there's not a theme park near where he lives? Yeah, we'll want to know if his parents will have guardianship. Do more career assessments to see what other areas he has strengths in, possibly interests in.
That's a great point, John, only because if you guys haven't noticed, if he wants to work in a theme park, most of the time they're outside, but he has to have frequent water breaks. So it might not be the most realistic potentially.
Do some first aid training. Desi, that's a good idea for a service or activity, and we'll get to that. Is he capable of handling money? So we might want to do more questions on that.
You know, this too is a good example where that career cluster or the SD My Life would come in handy. Because if it's something to that effect, is there something in SD My Life, that program that can explain, you know, the different options within that kind of a field? Because they do go through a lot of the job examples. So that'd be a good option for that one too.
Make sure that he works at a school carnival. That might be a good activity or service to do with him. Again, we'll get to that area in a few moments. Would this be a young man we would want to address an independent living and a measurable post-secondary goal? I think we need to look at that with this young man. We do have information on, you know, he needs some assistance. He needs some supports. So maybe he can live independently in an apartment with supports and budgeting, and you would reflect that Yes, independent living definitely needs to be addressed. Yep. So maybe Chaz will live independently with supports. Chaz will work with the local CSP to get those supports. You know, you got to be looking at what he's going to need. Maybe Chaz will live in a group home. Are there any questions about the transition assessments or measurable post-secondary goals? Anything anybody else wants to discuss while we're on this subject? If not, I think it is time for Maya to take over and we'll move on to courses of study.
All right, thank you, Kate. Yes, so like Kate said, the fourth thing that we looked at for indicator 13 are those courses of study. So we want to make sure, again, the courses of study are based on the students' MPSGs, or those measurable post-secondary goals. They should match the goals as well as graduation requirements, especially if they are on track to be graduating with that signed diploma. We also want to make sure that they are multi-year, which means that they are showing from the first time that they begin that transition IEP till the time they're going to either be graduating or aging out. We want them to be as specific as possible and individualized. So again, when you know their MPSGs, we want, if able, because we know some of you guys are smaller school districts and you don't always have as many choices when it comes to electives or classes, to go towards every single student's goal, what they want to do when they are done with school. But if you do have classes that would help them get to those goals, so if you had someone that wants to be a truck driver, you know, they can take some like mechanics courses or things like that. That's what we mean kind of by individualized and specific. And then we also want to make sure, again, that they're enabling your students to achieve those MPSGs to the best of your guys' abilities. And one thing to note is if you're substituting classes, especially when it comes to those core classes that are needed for graduation, it needs to be clearly identified to both the student and the parents as soon as possible, because it's most likely going to change that trajectory of them getting a signed South Dakota diploma versus just getting a certificate of completion. So you want to make sure you're having that conversation as soon as possible. And then also one thing to note as well is what we want to see instead of just the word elective is for them to be as specific as possible. So even if you don't know necessarily what the name of the class is going to be, you could even put math elective. But if you are knowing what type of math it is going to be, we would like to see that instead of just elective. Just because it shows that, again, they're working towards those MPSGs or those measurable post-secondary goals. And then the fifth thing for the indicator 13 checklist that we look at are those transition services and coordinated set of activities. So in that last activity that we just did, a lot of you guys were kind of writing some of those services and coordinated activities. So those are things that would go on that page instead of necessarily being written down on as their MPSG, but those were great examples. You know, like working at the carnival, like one of you guys had stated, that's a great example, especially if they're interested in working in that sort of field. And then we want to make sure that the things that we're putting down on the transition services and coordinated set of activities page allow to like positive post-school outcomes and help your student achieve those MPSGs. So we want to make sure that they're not just random activities, that they're actually working towards those goals. And then when it comes to compliance, you have to have at least one service or activity for each of your MPSGs. So that employment, education, and or training, and then independent living, again, when appropriate. Best practice is seeing one listed every year. So then again, we're seeing forward movement towards those goals and that they're achieving more things to help them get to where they want to be. We also want them to be individualized and not just overly general. We know sometimes some schools will have certain things that will go across the board. Like hopefully we're seeing that your students are coming to our Let's Talk Work or Catch the College Wave events. Like those we could understand seeing on multiple students this specific page. However, we want to see as individualized as possible. So again, they're working towards those goals. And we want to see that these activities are demonstrating involvement. Not only everything is relying on the school, but you also want the students to be doing some of these activities themselves, involving those families if possible, and those adult agencies, because you guys don't have to do everything on your own, because we know you try to do as much as you can, but again, you want some of that to be on the students and their families and those agencies when possible and applicable. And then one thing also that we've noticed a lot that we just suggest, instead of doing the student will obtain a driver's license, we just suggest putting that the student will study for their driver's exam. The reason we say this is because the school, by putting it on that transition services and coordinated set of activities page, is you can't necessarily say that they're going to pass that driver's test. So by putting that they're going to be studying for it instead of going to be obtaining it, you're not liable then again if they do not obtain that license. So that's just one thing we've seen quite a bit. So we just wanted to bring attention to that. And then if you guys are new to transition, or if it's been a while, this is just an example of what the transition activities page looks like. And I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen for 1 second and bring up this iTransition, because this is a really good place that students can go to, where it just helps them know different types of activities that they can do. And I'm just going to stop sharing and I will bring that up here quick. Okay, so this is the iTransition of South Dakota. So this was created by Disability Rights of South Dakota. So this is just something that your student can do that will help them know what they're interested in, what they're looking for when it comes to their IEP. And then Steph will also be talking kind of about this later. It's something that they can use also as a script when they're hopefully leading their IEP as well.
Using that app that she, and by the way, that iTransition SD is an app, but I think it would also help the student just feel more involved and understand what the different, parts of their IEP meeting is, and that they could actually participate more, because actually that app contains like 14 questions, I think. And then depending on how they answer, yes or no, there may be a drop-down box then that gives them different options to click on. And then at the end, they can actually print that document out, and it's something they can take with them to their IEP meeting. And so I think it would be easier for them to relate, like, what each part of the IEP meeting is about. And it's like, oh, hey, I remember that app asked me some questions about that. Here's some things that I wrote down that I need more. For example, I need more information about VR, or I need more information about a particular agency. So that could be part of the discussion that the team has.
I also put in the chat the link to the technical assistance guide. On page 22, there are samples of the things you could put in your activities and services. And if you're stuck and you don't know what to put in for this student, contact your liaison. We're always willing to talk through it with you.
Thank you, Kate. I was just going to bring that up. So yes, so make sure that you hold on to what Kate just put in our chat. Otherwise, you can find it on our website. It is easier to find now on our new website. So That technical assistance guide is now on our front home page, and then it's also under the transition IEP tab as well, just for reference, in case you guys lose that Kate put in the chat. And then we are just going to do kind of an activity, and we're going to do this as a whole. So I just want you guys to either put in the chat, or you can unmute yourself to explain either a transition service or activity that you would have each of these students do. So based on kind of what their goals are. So I will live in a supervised apartment. Does anybody have any service or activity that they would suggest for this student? Again, you can unmute or you can put it in the chat. And I promise, the sooner we get through this one, the sooner we have a little bit of a break.
You could work on things like folding laundry or making a bed or cooking.
Yes, absolutely. And it looks like we had someone say working on budgeting money skills, so that is awesome. Any other ones you guys would suggest for this student? Okay, we will move on to the next one. So I will work at Hy-Vee in the produce department. Any service or activity you guys would suggest for this young man?
You could start working on the different cuts of meat, or, what does pork look like? What does hamburger look like? Maybe some recipes that they could do, getting them out maybe to a butcher shop if there's one here in town.
Absolutely. Someone said job shadowing. That is great. I know someone had said in a previous workshop, they had said identifying different types of produce as well. So you had mentioned the different types of meat, but also like knowing your fruits and vegetables. If someone asks, someone suggested FFA classes, learning how to get up on time and setting alarms and time management. So that is awesome. And then for our third and final student, Jada will attend a technical college to obtain a cosmetology degree. So what sort of services and activities would you suggest for her?
Advocating for herself for the support she needs once she gets to the technical college.
Absolutely. Someone said take the AccuPlacer or visit the site or a job shadow.
I love that we're seeing a lot of soft skills too. When we look back at the chat here, we have how to get to work on a daily schedule, getting to work on time, setting alarms, and transportation options. If someone has difficulties with transportation, working on researching that and figuring out what they're going to do.
Someone suggested even working with VR. That is a great resource as well.
Hey, the first one where Maya, I will
Yes.
live in a supervised apartment and we use a wheelchair. I think just to kind of keep the handoff going for when this student exits school and kind of enters that next world, it might be real important for that person to know, and maybe the support system to know that, we might have some adaptations within that apartment for that person to be able to cook, to be able to clean, to do the things that anyone else does independently. And so maybe to get a head start is to what kind of adaptations are in the home and how do we get things done in the home we're currently living in? Just kind of a
Absolutely.
thought for that person that uses a chair.
And to do that, maybe we'll talk to the folks at ILC, or if they're on family support, what adaptations can these agencies help with?
Go to link. Yep.
Yeah, and I would throw in there with your last example, Maya, the one about getting a cosmetology degree. one of the young ladies who attended our YLF when she was in school, and this is many years ago, I've been doing this for a long time, but her goal was to be a cosmetologist. And she went to Lake Area Tech, but she had a learning disability, and reading was, I mean, it took her a lot longer to read and comprehend, you know, everything. And we had a conversation one time, and she said, Bev, you have any idea how much reading there is to do for a cosmetology degree, knowing science, chemicals, that kind of stuff. And she was really struggling getting through all of those textbooks and understanding all that information. So they had Dakota Link do an assessment with her, and she got some computer, you know, programs. And again, this has been quite some time ago, but she said she would have never made it through. She would have never been successful getting that degree without that assistive technology that she got, thankfully.
That's awesome. Thank you, Bev. I appreciate that. And then one last thing is someone did suggest having her catch the college wave. So yes. And again, those will be happening next spring. So keep an eye out on your emails, and hopefully you guys can have some of your students attend those. And we are going to take a short, 5-minute break? Is that what you guys are thinking? The rest of my team.
We'll be back at
Just come back
2:40.
at 22 and we'll start again at 20 minutes to 3.
All right, so you guys get an 8-minute break. So we'll see you then at 2:40. So you guys go stretch. It is 2:40. All right, it's 2:40, so we will get started again. Hopefully everybody got a little break that they needed. So we are going to do another group activity. This time we are only going to use one of our scenarios just for time's sake. So we're going to focus on scenario 3. And I'm just going to have you guys put in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and just talk about the courses of study that you would want for this particular student. Only when it comes to electives, you guys don't have to do any of their core classes. And this would be if we lived in a perfect world and you had every type of class imaginable. You can shout those out again or put them in the chat. And then I also want you to think of some services and activities for this student. And again, some of them had kind of already been addressed in the last one, but again, just put them out again. Oops. Well, for some reason, it did not come up on my screen, but it is supposed to be for scenario 3. So I apologize here.
That is Chaz.
Yes.
A 17-year-old who likes amusement parks.
Thank you. I will put that up on the screen. I apologize. I do not know why I did that. Okay. So here is, I apologize, guys. Apparently technology does not want to cooperate with me. Okay, can you guys all see scenario 3? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. I apologize again. Technical difficulties. Okay, so again, if you guys just want to unmute or put in the chat what courses of study when it comes to electives that you would suggest for this student, or those transition services and activities. Okay, someone suggested the FCCLA classes. And activities, learning how to use public transportation. Consumer math, life skills courses, so they can learn how to cook, clean, and do laundry. Also a self-advocacy course was suggested as well. Anything else that you guys would suggest for Chaz? Job shadowing at a theme park. Awesome. Another thing you guys could think of would be project skills. Someone had also suggested life skills math. So they can learn cooking and recipes and how to buy food on a budget. Awesome. All right. Well, okay, we will head to the next slide here. Mhm.
And you know, while you're doing that, Maya, something I think that we didn't spend a lot of time talking about with the course of study is, like Maya said, it needs to be, you know, completely filled out from the time you start transition planning, either until they graduate or age out. And that is the area that sometimes schools get caught with, as far as a review, is for those students who are not getting a regular signed diploma and are continuing through the age of 21. You need to actually fill in a course of study for those students then during that time frame. And a lot of times we'll hear teachers say, well, you know, I don't know exactly what they're going to be doing, or yeah, they're probably going to be going to a community support provider, or we're sending them to an 18 to 21 program, but we don't know exactly what that encompasses. You need to communicate with someone from that program and kind of find out what are the main parts of their day. So for example, they're probably working on job skills in some fashion. They might be able to do project skills depending on what the program is. They're more than likely going to be working on independent living skills, budgeting skills, maybe communication skills. So the course of study might read different or look a little different than, you know, when they're in 9th through 12th grade, but it still needs to be completed. So if you haven't had a student that's, you know, gone through the age of 21 for a while and you're not sure about that, again, just check. You certainly can contact your transition liaison and we can kind of walk through that together.
Bev, just to add on to that, I think that it's important for everybody to know too, that even if you're a student gets supports at an 18 to 21 program that's not within your school district, so they might be at a CSP or another type of program, your school district is still responsible for having that IEP completed and all the indicators done correctly. So even though they might have the student, the responsibility is still on the school district to complete all of those sections and to do them accurately. And so, you know, I guess that communication piece is big, and, you know, having that discussion with that adult agency or wherever that student is to discuss what needs to go on there, and then what do they have to offer or what do they have to provide, and put it together so that your IEP has those services, activities, and of course a study that is relating to where what that student will be doing. Made some good points there, Bev. Thanks for bringing that up. I had it on my list on the next one.
Okay, and then one last thing, again, that we've kind of mentioned throughout, and then hopefully you guys take away is, again, you guys do not have to do it all yourself. We know you as teachers and district staff are very, very busy and are doing the best that you possibly can for your students. So again, reach out and collaborate and brainstorm with those outside agencies, again, with parental or guardian consent, as well as with the student and the families, because they can help too, and they can help them get to the goals that they want at the end of the day. And again, like I had mentioned before, when it comes to those transition services and activities page, have them also be a part of it as well, because it makes it more meaningful and it makes them see that the end result is a possibility if they work hard and do everything that they possibly can. And I will have Dan take it away with pre-employment services.
Okay, this is kind of an added benefit too for everybody is, you know, we're kind of doing an extension here of the services and activities because pre-employment transition services are available to the school districts, to students across the state. Pre-employment transition services, you know, according to what we have on our slide, they can begin at age 14. And typically pre-ETs, which is the short term, you know, you'll hear people use the word pre-ETs for pre-employment transition services, but they're provided by the VR counselor. And so they're available to help your students, you know, with employment or attending post-secondary education. The 5 things listed here are all pieces to pre-employment transition services. So they've got job exploration and counseling, work-based learning experiences, post-secondary education counseling, workplace readiness training, and instruction and self-advocacy. VR counselors across the state are actually going to the school districts and providing these types of services. So there are things that can be added on to your service page or your services and activities page. But that's coordinating with your VR counselor and seeing if they can come into your school to provide these. Back several years ago, excuse me, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act amended the Rehabilitation Act of way back in the 70s, and it requires VR agencies to set aside 15% of their federal funds to provide pre-employment transition services for students with disabilities. And so these are available not only to your students that are eligible for vocational rehabilitation services, but they're also available for students that might be potentially eligible for vocational rehabilitation services. And I would think all of the students that you have on your IEP, and even some of the students that might be on a 504 could be eligible to get pre-employment transition services. These voc rehab counselors have been encouraged to come into your school to actually provide these services for you. And if you think about it, you know, it not only will help the student, but it also helps the VR counselor, but it might also help you in the long run too, because they provide some service that you might not have time to get to or have time to prepare for. And you could do more preparation if you have a VR counselor in your school assisting with these particular pieces. And I know of some VR counselors that set up a schedule to go maybe once a month or twice a month, go into the school, provide these services for a group of students, maybe for 45 minutes during the school day. So it's just something to consider and to keep in mind is that these are available. The pre-ETs really don't replace the things that you're already doing, but it's kind of an added benefit for you, and the VR counselors can provide these.
Dan, we do have a question in the chat. Do students have to apply and to be accepted to VR to receive those services, these pre-ET services?
No, I think it's just basically you can provide them. The VR counselor comes in. They're basically students that might be potentially eligible to get VR services. So they don't have to have an intake and to be considered eligible to get these services.
I was just in some schools with one of our VR counselors, and there is an information sheet that they collect for students that they're going to be working on pre-eds, but it is not the full application. They don't have to go through the eligibility process until such time as they want to access things like project skills. There's no money. Well, I was going to say, you know, they don't have the money to spend on things like project skills and stuff unless they are eligible for VR, but they can still do that job counseling, career exploration work on those soft skills with those students.
It's an interesting thing with VR. A lot of people out there have this, you know, thought that project or vocational rehabilitation is project skills, and they are so much more for your students than just project skills. And these 5 areas are things that they can cover not only, you know, within a group of students in your class, but one-to-one with the students. And once they start working with the student, they can work with them all the way through transition and into college, onto their first job, even sometimes their second job. They can make referrals to Dakota Link like you can. They can refer them to the benefits specialist if they're on SSI and they're going to work, or those kind of things, just so that they're aware of how wages might impact a student's benefits. So they're a very good resource for you and your school.
So my apologies, Dawn. You had asked that question and I was typing an answer when Dan started talking. I misunderstood your question. Because I put, yes, they do need to apply for those services. I was reading that, do they need to apply to receive VR services? But that's not what you said. You were referring to the pre-eds. So my apologies.
And you're correct. I mean, I think that's correct. You know, to get, you know, one-to-one service, as far as, you know, assistance with project skills, or you know, maybe some supports to go to college or to get a job, then they need to be determined eligible by VR. But one thing about that too is, you know, don't, I guess, hold back and say, well, I don't think this student will be eligible. Let that VR counselor make that determination. If your student is on an IEP and getting service, you know, IEP services at the school, good chance that they might be eligible. So, you know, let that VR counselor make that decision of whether or not they are or aren't, versus, you know, just assuming that they might not be because they have a learning disability or a mild type disability. Sometimes these students are eligible as well. So let the VR counselor make that decision. And if they are eligible, they're a great resource for your IEP team.
In fact, sometimes students who don't meet that prong of eligibility for school, that maybe it's not affecting their schoolwork, maybe they have ADHD, maybe they have a mental health issue. VR can possibly work with those students as well. So yeah, never presume that they're not going to be eligible, because it's especially for pre-eds, it's pretty broad who VR can work with. Okay. So number 6, area 6 under indicator 13 are annual goals, those measurable annual goals you guys write for all students on IEPs. When you're working with a transition student, we talked about the first thing that you talk about in your IEP is those measurable post-secondary goals. That should inform everything you're doing. It should also inform those annual goals. They should link to those measurable post-secondary goals. They should be working to get that student to wherever they want to be in their life after they're done with school. They should be related to the student's needs and be specific to transition. It's pretty difficult to have a goal that is not going to address transition, but be thinking of, how do we relate this specifically to what the student wants to do? So let's say you have a reading comprehension goal. What does that student want to do? Do they want to be a truck driver? Maybe relate that to reading the CDL manual. Do they want to work in, I'm drawing a blank now because I had an example and now it's gone. Is there some kind of a technical manual are they going to need to read for their position? Job descriptions, writing resumes, filling out things like that. Those can be worked into those goals. We have some good examples too in that TA guide for transition. So I do encourage you to look at that. And when you can relate these goals to what they want to do, you have better buy-in. They see where these things are taking them, and they're taking them to what they want to do. So that student is more engaged in their IEP. So it shows a better connection between their dream and how they're going to get there. So here are just a few examples. So if someone's interested in culinary arts, perhaps we're looking at a math measurement goal, or a cosmetologist, we have a behavior goal in relating to people, maybe how to deal with conflict when somebody doesn't like their hair. And again, reading that CDL manual or a manual that is appropriate to the career cluster they are interested in. So developing annual goals that genuinely link to their goals, their measurable post-secondary goals, requires a thorough understanding of the skills, knowledge, and admission or job requirements of that specific goal. So they should be really narrowing in on what that student wants to accomplish as an adult when they are finished with their schooling. And again, I encourage you to look at that TA guide because that really takes you step by step through the transition IEP process. Yeah.
All right, so now we're coming to number 7, the student invitation to IEP meetings. Students must be invited to their IEP meetings whenever transition will be discussed by age 16 and until they graduate or age out. So the intent behind this regulation is to have the student actively involved in the transition process. Think about what you could do to let the students know what you really value and how you value their input, and what you want, how you want their input added to the meeting. So something as simple as spending a few minutes with a student a couple weeks before their meeting to explain what happens at the meeting and what you'd like their input on. Sending them their own personal invitation is just a way to make them feel valued in the whole process. That we heard that recommendation earlier on, and it seems to be a good tool to really include the students and make them feel like they are part of the team. If the student is not at the IEP, you need to document somewhere in the PPWN the reason and how the team considered their strengths, preferences, and needs. You could put that just as student input into the present levels. All right. So again, the goal should be to have the student actively involved in the IEP meeting to the greatest extent of their ability. Whether that is just introducing all the team members, showing pictures of things they're involved in, or actually running the meeting. Some ideas to increase student involvement in the process is the student-led meeting script. So I think this is added in the group of papers that you got. Is that right, Bev or Kate?
I think it was included in the documents that, were recommended. And
Sure.
it's on our website as well.
Okay, yeah, it's the student-led meeting script. It's on our website, but I mean, it's a great tool for the kid to even keep if you know that they're going to be with you, keeping them all for until they graduate. I mean, the purpose of this meeting after I graduate from high school, I want to just being able to look at the documents and seeing the progress throughout the years is pretty neat, I feel like. And also the iTransition, southdakota.org website. I don't know if you want to link that up to the PowerPoint, Maya. Or we already did too. The student answers the 14 questions that Bev talked about before. And it kind of drafts a transitional plan for them. So that's also on our website. All right.
Does anybody, these are just a couple suggestions, but does anybody out there do anything different, or that's kind of cool to just get the student more actively involved? I mean, anything you do is good.
It's a great opportunity to have your student take ownership of his or her meeting. The student-led IEP questions, it really takes the heat off some of the teachers and the negative energy. It makes it positive. I know everybody's feeling nervous going into an IEP, and if we can make this process positive and the students that are usually dodging the people that are in the meeting, if you can make that positive and that positive relationship, I feel like it can really change the tune of the meeting. So let's see, adult agency involvement. Okay, let's break this regulation down. It has 3 important aspects to it. If appropriate, there needs to be some discussion among the team to determine if it's appropriate to invite an outside agency. So it would be best to document somewhere in the PPWN or in the IEP how it was discussed and what was decided. Evidence that a representative was invited to an IEP meeting invite that lists any outside representative who are being invited to the meeting. And you must get prior written consent from the parent or student if they are 18 or older before you send the meeting invite to the parents. The consent must be in writing. So it used to be that you could make a call and they could agree. Now it's got to be in writing, and it's got to be dated before the signed and dated the date that they gave consent. If a student is 18 or older and does not have a legal guardian, he or she can give consent to invite. They have them sign the consent form, and that should be good enough. All right. If any agency is going to be paying for or providing transition services in the next year, that agency should be invited to the meeting. Again, going over this, these are just some things to keep in mind. We can't tell you how to get consent, but there's different ways you can do it at the beginning of the year, or you can do it after every meeting, and it's good for 1 year or until the next meeting that agencies are involved in. So it's good just to have a plan in place on how you're going to do it. It happens, so often that it's the week before the IEP or days before, and that's, if you have a plan in place, you won't get caught up in that. So I'm gonna flip the slide. All right, so the process for inviting outside agencies, again, step 1, it's a team decision. Everybody discusses before the IEP who will be invited. Number 2, it needs to be signed and dated. It has to be written, has to be dated. We used to say there could be a call again, but I went over that just a little bit ago. So number 3, wait until you get the consent back to send notices out. So again, everything just needs to be documented. Make sure you don't get caught up in trying to send everything out at the same time you're trying to get the consent. Are there any questions regarding that? All right. Again. All right, here's the state template for the consent to invite outside agencies. The consent will remain in effect for the next IEP meeting or 1 year from the date signed, whichever comes first. So your consent is voluntary and may be revoked in writing at any time, but this is just the important highlighted note that, again, you need to invite, get consent before you invite. I think that's.
And the reason we're really kind of hammering away at this one is this has been one of the 8 areas that has been out of compliance the most when we have done reviews of school districts in the last 2, if not 3 years. So we're really wanting to make sure everybody understands this. And what we're seeing when it's out of compliance is when the school district is sending the consent, this form that's up on the screen right now is being sent to the family with the meeting invite form. You're sending both of them together. And why would that not be in compliance? It's not in compliance because the meeting invite form, you're informing the parent who you're inviting, but you really shouldn't be inviting them until the parent has said, okay, you can invite them. So the consent form has to come first, and you have to have that in your possession that's signed and dated by the parent first.
Is that clear? I know we have someone in the chat who asked if we have this, then is it already consent to go ahead and invite them? If you have it signed from, let's say you have an open house in the fall and you have all your parents sign them for that year, or if you had the parents sign them at last year's IEP meeting for the coming year, then you're in pretty good shape. Does that answer the question? If once you get a process started and keep going with it, those are good for 1 year or until the next meeting. So I do know a lot of teachers are just at every meeting having a consent to invite outside agencies, because you can make a pretty educated guess about who that student is going to want to work with. Yep, exactly. As long as you have that, it's current, it's dated prior to that meeting notice going out, you should be good.
And then also make sure that on the meeting notice, when it's sent out, whichever agencies you did get consent to invite are noted here as well, that they are marked and written down, just again, to show who you had gotten consent to invite.
Okay, so what happens when a parent or guardian doesn't give consent? You just continue to talk to the parents about, the good that can come from having agencies there and just getting the idea out there. If they don't, don't stop sharing and trying to talk to the parents, start early, bring it up every year. If you share information about agencies, note that in the PPWN or on the present level pages. So continue to share, continue to share, continue to share. And as a reminder, as a district, discuss how, when, and who will decide what agencies to invite. Develop a process for inviting outside agencies and representatives. Remember the written parental consent before sending the meeting notice, and sending the consent to invite outside agencies forms and the meeting notice at the same time is not in compliance. So
It's, it's too bad sometimes when parents do object to having that outside agency. I mean, it's just, ouch. It's kind of like getting that that thing in your belly where it'd be good. And that's why one of the comments Steph made was to start early. So if we're getting some, just for example, Voc Rehab, if we're getting some pre-ed services, early on at the age of 14 and 15, we're kind of getting the feel that, hey, this is an okay thing. Maybe then it translates to mom and dad that this is okay. Sometimes they get a bad taste in their mouth for some reason, or something bad took place. And so it's kind of finding out why, they don't want someone to come to a meeting, or maybe it's a stigma thing within the school district, that, we have a disability, but it's having those discussions and providing good positive information about what it is that they can provide for their son or daughter in regard to their transition services, and maybe even some long-term supports at some point.
Okay, I think this may be our last group activity. For this activity, hopefully Maya can bring up our scenario again, scenario 3, I believe it was, with Chaz. There we go. Thank you. So when we look at Chaz and all the information here about him, who would you consider inviting or discuss possibly inviting to the meeting with the parents? Put it in the chat, or you certainly can unmute and chat with us. That would be great too. Okay, we've got a couple of VRs, which would be great. Independent living choices. That's a great idea too. When you look at his independent living needs, it looks like he's got several areas of need there as well. Aspire, which is a community support provider up in Aberdeen. So there are, oh boy, what is it, 19 or 20? Kate, how many support providers do we have there? I think it's 19 or 20.
I think
It's actually 21.
Oh, 21. Okay.
Dan knows.
So around the state. But yes, that could be a possibility as well.
I know a lot of you are working with family support coordinators. So if this individual might have a family support coordinator.
Right. And that would be a great place to start. Okay, yeah, I guess those were the ones I had thought of after reading this scenario. Anybody have any other ideas?
I keep going back to the benefit specialist too. I think it's real important to, this particular individual might be applying for SSI at some point here, and they're 17, going to be 18 years old. Benefit specialist to help with how those wages might impact that SSI.
Yeah, good point, Dan. And there is a benefit specialist that kind of works with several of the VR, or with several of the VR offices around the state. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, there's 6 of them across the state, so they're available.
Yeah, there's kind of a myth that seems to be pervasive that if you get SSI disability payments, you can't work. And that's not true. So those folks really help you discover what that will do to what your wages will do to your SSI benefits, and how that impacts the assistance needed.
And if you are new to working with transition age students, another document or something you might want to check out is we have a document called South Dakota Adult Services, and we have just listed all of the agencies that we can think of in the state that could possibly, be a partner or be invited to an IEP meeting. And it just gives a very brief, like 1 sentence perhaps, description of services, or what they, the kind of people they work with, or what kind of services that they can provide, and then contact information. So that document is on our website as well. I can't
I
remember.
think just to add on to that too, Bev, is another one that I was thinking of too was this Chris is 17 years old. And so, you know, Kate's going to talk about transfer of rights in a minute. And sometimes parents have a very difficult time making a decision on guardianship. And this individual, that's probably one of those people that would probably have to have that discussion. And maybe there's somebody out there that can assist the family in making that decision prior to getting guardianship or looking down that road. So anyway, I think that kind of leads into that section, but there's different agencies that might be able to assist. One might be the Independent Living Center, South Dakota Parent Connection. Maybe it's Disability Rights, South Dakota. These agencies are available and they're willing to give you a chat if you have a question or your families have questions on that.
Yeah, those are all great suggestions, Dan, and they might not all be agencies that you actually have to invite to the meeting. Perhaps you're just giving them information, referring them to, you know, if you'd like to learn more about guardianship, or if you have questions and would like to talk to somebody further, you know, you could contact Parent Connection, for example, or Disability Rights. So, okay. Well, thank you. Turn it over to Kate.
So yeah, we kind of gave you a little bit of a teaser. Transfer of rights. Transfer of rights is not one of the areas under Indicator 13. However, it is something we look at when we come in and review files as part of your compliance monitoring process. And from here on out, that's these are the extra things that we also look at. So by age 17, the student's IEP must include a statement that the student has been informed of their rights, and then they'll transfer to that student upon reaching age 18. I've been asked, why 17? Why not just before 18? Well, that gives the family a year to look into those options. Is the student going to need a guardian or a conservator? Are they going to need a rep payee for their Social Security if they receive those funds? Is a power of attorney appropriate? Or maybe they have a very good relationship. This young person is open to their advice and they just have supported decision making. So that gives them time to explore that, contact people like Parent Connection and Disability Rights and see what their options are. And you might want to talk about what rights will transfer at age 18. You know, I remember when my children turned 18, suddenly I couldn't see their medical reports anymore on the MyChart or the, you know, whatever online service your doctors are using. They have the right to make decisions on their own. Just like any typical 18-year-old, if a guardianship or power of attorney is not established, those rights will go to that student on their 18th birthday. Then you have to get consent from that student to share information with the family. So we have a few options here to look at. If guardianship or other protected status is considered, here, you know, we talked about Parent Connection, Disability Rights. There is some funding available to help individuals if they want to pursue guardianship. The South Dakota Guardianship Establishment Program has some funds available. SD Law Help, they'll be able to help you find an attorney who has experience in this, possibly also providing some low cost or free legal advice for the families. And recently, Parent Connection and Disability Rights South Dakota have come up with a guide called Preparing for the Future, Understanding Guardianship and Alternatives. Our goal with TSLP this year is to try to get a physical copy of this into each of your hands, every student, every teacher who works with transition age students, because you can show the parents this guide. It's very good. It's very thorough about what their options are, how they go about pursuing this. And it is also available on the Parent Connection website under their guides. I'm sorry, I was distracted. We have a question. On our IEPs, it has a box that you check saying that the student was informed to transfer rights. Does that mean the same thing as the top line you have there? We also list the prior written notice that we discussed, prior written transfer of rights. What we look for is on that IEP, yep, that's that checkbox, and there should be a date. And we look to make sure that that date is before that student's birthday, before their 17th birthday. So that's what we look for. And thank you, Becky Erickson, for providing the link directly to that guardianship guide. So I would encourage your parents who are looking into that option to refer to that guide. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is graduation requirements. There is one standard signed diploma in the state of South Dakota, and students need to meet a bare minimum of academic criteria to earn that diploma. And all students with disabilities have that same opportunity as their peers with the supported instruction of accommodations as appropriate. If you are veering away from that, if you are looking at courses, if the student cannot complete those courses, cannot meet those standards, and when we look at modifications versus accommodations, are they expected to know the same standard as their peer? If not, that's going to be a modification, and those students may not be eligible to receive that diploma, and the families need to be made aware of that. When you're making those decisions about those modifications, they need to be made aware this might affect that student's ability to earn a signed diploma and what that could mean for their future employment, schooling, whatnot. So be very mindful when you're making those changes as well. Parents and students must be informed at least 1 year prior to the graduation date. So if your students is looking at graduating with that diploma at least 1 year prior, you need to state that in that IEP. And then you need to list what required courses remain to meet graduation criteria. You need to list those out. So at least 1 year before graduation, you need to provide that date that they are anticipated to graduate and exactly what remains, what they still need to accomplish to get that diploma. That needs to be listed out. That is another place where we've kind of run into some confusion. And this is an exit date. That date is an exit date. So if you have a student who is going to be aging out at age 21, but maybe they're walking across the stage with their peers when they're 18, it would not be that date when they're walking across the stage. It would be the exit date when they are leaving school services. Any questions on that? So I always get ahead of myself. The last box, if modifications are used for a required course, it would not meet those core standards for receiving that regular high school diploma. And I cannot emphasize enough, talk to the parents about this, make sure they understand. As a family support coordinator, I often had parents who said, why aren't they getting a diploma, you know, a month before their 21-year-old is scheduled to exit the school district? So be sure they're informed and that they understand that.
Kate, it does look like we have a question in the chat, and this also might go for Beth too, but it says, but if they had any modifications in any of their high school classes, they can't graduate with a diploma, correct?
That is correct. If they are not expected to learn the same standard as their peers in that particular required course, then it takes them out of the diploma track. So, and Beth, feel free to elaborate or give more information on that. So the next slide, we kind of covered a little bit too. If grad requirements have been met, they were taking the same coursework required of all the students who are graduating with a regular diploma. And you can use those accommodations or that differentiated instruction, but it still meets the standard course requirements, covering the same material, but over a longer period of time or in a different location. You know, we always talk We always talk about algebra 1 seems to be a hang up for everybody. And if they can't get it in one semester or 1 year, however, you know, like with block scheduling, sometimes that's 2 quarters they have it. They can take it longer. You said, say what you just said. You know, I go off the cuff so much, I'm not sure what I just said, but I think they're using the same standards, but a different textbook, you know, it depends, I'm not sure. And I'll
Correct.
go back to what Beth says over and over again, look at your standard. Are they learning that standard? And I think Beth, in fact, you had a comment.
Kate, you're correct. If the students are learning the same standards, but maybe at a lower level, then that's more of an accommodation. That's not a modification. And that algebra 1 is a perfect example, you know, because a lot of kids have trouble getting that algebra 1 credit. So can they get that credit in 2 years rather than in 1 year? There's now a course out there that's called Algebra Enhancement that you take alongside of the Algebra 1 course. And so the kids are getting like a double dose of Algebra 1. Maybe you're presenting it to them in the Algebra Enhancement a different way, but it's still the same standards. That way the students can get that Algebra 1 credit and another math credit, one of those other math credits, because remember they have to have 3 credits. So they would be getting 2 credits that year.
I have a question. This is Desi on the spreading like the algebra 1 over a year, a whole year instead of a semester or 2 years. Do you have an example of what that looks like in the high school situation for scheduling or anything like that? Or how do we convey that to those people?
Yeah, okay. And again, you don't want it to be just for special ed students.
Right,
You want this
right.
to be because there might be some other kids that struggle with algebra 2 as well that are not on an IEP. And so you'd want to open it up for all of those kids.
Right.
What that looks like, I know in smaller schools, it might be a little more difficult just because it has to be done by that gen ed teacher, and his or her classes might already be class periods, or I'm not using the right word, have prep periods are already filled up with all of the math classes that they have to offer in their school. So I would reach out to surrounding districts and see how they're doing it, because I'm not sure how that would look. I just know that it is an option and it is available.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
There's a question in the chat about, can we write this down to show parents that you can spread this out? I would be having those conversations with those families in those IEP meetings, talking about, you know, we realize that this particular requirement is going to be difficult for this student. So here is an option. You know, we can teach it more slowly. We can use the algebra enhancement. We're going to support this student so that they can be successful in completing this course and getting this credit.
But it has to be worked out with your district as well, because again,
Yep.
you got to be able to offer that class. So work with your principals, I'm not sure who does your scheduling for your kids. And so.
In a pre-algebra class and an algebra 1 class, I think that's great support. But that pre-algebra, correct me again if I'm wrong, Beth, that would meet one of your math credits, but it would not meet that algebra 1 credit, of course.
No. And maybe instead of doing pre-algebra, maybe you want to do algebra 1 and then do an algebra 1 enhancement class. So they're taking the 2 classes the same, because the algebra 1 enhancement class has to be taken at the same semester or the same time as the algebra 1 class. So maybe one's in the morning, one's in the afternoon. So it's like they're getting that double dose of algebra 1. It's not the same material per se. You're not working on homework. It's more like teaching it again.
And, you know, we always tend to talk about the algebra 1 when we talk about this, but you might need to be rethinking of reading or lit or, you know, any required course. But of course, the math is what we all seem to hang up on. And I will readily admit that I had difficulty with that one as well, as a student who was not on an IEP. So But if graduation requirements have not been met, if you substituted a course or used modifications, if you did not meet the course standards, such as not using grade level content or not required to learn the same knowledge, demonstrate the same knowledge or content, then that would take that student out of that diploma track. You need to be having conversations with the family about what that means. And then you could then issue a certificate of completion, or some districts call it a district diploma. And that language can be kind of confusing for families if you use a district diploma, because I think it's a high school diploma when it's not a accredited South Dakota diploma. So just be having those conversations and make sure that they understand when those courses are modified. And some students have to have those modifications. We know that. But just be very mindful when you start deviating from that course, what that could mean to their future. Any more questions in this area?
I think it's important too to just kind of stress that last bullet on there too, Kate, that issuing a document based on modified course requirements and or content does not end the district's obligation for FAPE. I think that's kind of important, that if a student does not get a diploma, they're still eligible to come back and continue services, so that they can either get that or complete or continue to work on their transition services to better prepare them for when they do exit the school.
Correct, and thank you for bringing that up, because I skimmed past it. Like my young man I brought up earlier, who decided to leave schooling when he was 19 years old, he could have continued. He could have come back. Say he went out for a year and decided, ooh, I need more supports. He could have come back to the school because he did not have a signed diploma. It's also important to note that if a student meets those academic criteria by the time they're 18 for that signed diploma, but has further transition needs, independent living, job skills, those things, that student can remain in the district as long as they do not receive that signed diploma. As long as you can put it in your file and then continue to work on those transition skills. Even though they've met the academic criteria, they have not met their transition criteria. Okay. Exit coding. And Beth, I think I will defer to you on this one if you're willing. You are the exit coding guru.
Sure. So when we talk about exit coding, what we're talking about is that coding that's in Infinite Campus. So there's two places in Infinite Campus where you put in end codes or exit codes. And one is and they're both on that enrollment tab. And the first one is that general ed enrollment or end code. Those end codes are just a little bit different than these special ed codes. They mean the same thing, but they're just a little bit different number. So these common ones that we use here is the 2 that is graduated with that regular high school diploma. 3, notice it says continues, but they completed their IEP modified / course requirements. That means they're going to come back in the fall. They've completed their IEP team goals, maybe their instructional goals, but they still have to come back for transition. They're still going to continue. And number 13, look at that, it says discontinued. So they may have completed their IEP goals, but they've not completed all the coursework needed for graduation, but they're not coming back in the fall. So that's what that 13 code is. We really discourage you from using that 13 code until in the fall, because how do you know if they're not coming back in the fall? Maybe in the spring they tell you they're not coming back, but then something happens during the summer and then they end up showing up on that first day of school and enrolling in school again, which is what we hope they do, because we really want those kids to be able to complete their education. Any questions?
Okay, summary of performance. We're winding down here. So we've worked with students all these years, and now all of a sudden it's time for them to exit. They either graduate with their high school diploma or they age out at the age of 21. Then there's a requirement that says the school must provide the student with a summary of performance document when they go. And this is kind of an important piece of information as well. It's basically summarizing what took place over the last however many years. It could be 4 or 5 years, it could be 7, 8 years. It's kind of that summary of their academic achievement and functional performance. It's providing some recommendations on how to assist that student in meeting those post-secondary goals that were established while they were in high school. Who can help? Who is the student connected to? Who are the people that the student has worked with to help them so far? And, if you're handing that baton off, they're exiting the school, who are we handing the baton off? And what information might that group or that program or service need to have to continue providing services for that student? This is kind of an important piece because it really kind of lays the line out for where you guys have been. I always like to look at the summary performance as maybe it's even something to look at when we start doing transition, as how are we gonna complete this when we're all done working with that student, and what is it gonna look like? It's kind of a snapshot. Current, where are they at with all the supports we've provided, what's worked, what didn't work, things that we've tried, our goals, all of that kind of information should be included in this so that it's ready to go for the next person. And typically, you do this the last year of school, probably within the last few months of while they're still at the school. And, I would encourage you to have the student provide input on it. Maybe the parents. It's not considered requirement to have a meeting with everybody to provide this document, but it's probably a good practice to kind of bring the team together and say, hey, we're exiting. Let's put together the summary of performance so we can hand it off to the student. One of the things that's kind of I forgot we had this slide. It's a good practice to do that meeting, but you don't have to do it. Another thing on this slide, reevaluation is not required prior to that student exiting, but the PPWN is required as the student is exiting the school, so there's going to be a change of placement. The people that might want this document might be a college coordinator of disability services, the person that provides supports to them at college. It could be the VR counselor. It could be the community support provider. What information would you like for them to know so that all the work that you've done with this student doesn't just disappear and they start all over again? Providing this information is just a next step in that handoff from one service to the next. I don't know, does anybody have any questions on that or any more comments? So if you notice on the very last underneath these bullets here, the SOP is done. Now what? Maybe have a party. Let's celebrate the success, not only what you've done over the past few years, but where the student has been and where they've come exiting the school. So celebrate this.
And I would just add that when we're out doing as part of the state review team, we will look to see that a summary of performance, has been done. There should be a copy of it in the student's file, but it's really a document meant to give to the student, the family, for them to take to their next provider or whoever is going to be working with them in the future. So they should have the original, but you should keep a copy of it in the student file.
for additional information on the graduation requirements and whatnot, we have some links for you. And when this goes on the website, these will be live links in the PowerPoint. As for today, we will be, to get your CECHs, you'll be going on to that Canvas system and logging in as Beth described. There will be a question about what you learned today. And also there will be a code, and that code is capital IND 13. So abbreviated indicator 13. IND 13, and the I is capitalized. Is there an example of an SOP PPWN? That is a good question. Do we have something like that on our website, folks? I am not recalling one.
You know, you can get the SOP off of the state. Is it campus, Beth?
I think there is a copy of the SOP
Yeah.
itself, but I think what they're asking for is an example of the PPWN because of that change in placement.
Right. So the PPWN just has to indicate that because a student has graduated or because a student has aged out, that there's now been a change of placement.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that the student's no longer eligible for special ed services.
If I remember right, that's a checkbox on the form, correct?
I think they still have to answer those questions though on the prior written notice.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? Hopefully it does.
Good question.
Here are several links that will help you with your transition questions. Of course, our project, the tslp.org, lots of information there, and you can always contact your liaison. We are here for you. So shoot us an email, give us a phone call. The Zero Center at the University of Oklahoma is a good spot to go for some information. And again, these will all be live links in the PowerPoint. The transition resources at the Department of Rehabilitation Services. There are lots of very good, there's lots of very good information there. University of Kansas Transition Coalition. And of course, we work with the NTACT Collaborative quite a bit. That NTACT website, you do need to create an account, but it is a free account. So you just sign in the one time and then you log in and you have access to all of their information. So those are some great places to check out.
And Kate, it does, oh,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. It does look like the person that had a question about the SOP is just wondering if there's an example of wording for the change of placement.
Mm-hmm.
Beth, do you know if there's an example of that?
Guess I'm not sure. I would check the IEP TA document to see if there's some wording in there. I don't know if I've ever been asked that question before.
Our transition technical assistance guide does not have examples. We have the summary of performance document and some examples of how to fill that out, but we don't have, I guess, an example of the PPWN, how that could be worded.
Right.
Good thing to keep in mind.
Sometimes
when
we try to be
do.
careful about trying to give some wording for that because it's really on an individual basis. You should be thinking of those. So what was that conversation, or you know, for each student, you know, it shouldn't be a cookie cutter type of a response.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, Kate, continue.
Yeah, okay. Well, once again, firstly, we'd like to thank you for coming today and spending your time with us. And thank you for all you do for your students. We are here to help you. Don't be shy. Please approach your local liaison or your regional rep for questions that you have. And again, that code you're going to want to put into the Canvas system is capital I, lowercase n, d, 1, 3. And if anyone has any other questions, we will hang around and answer. We'll hang around and answer any questions you have for us. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day. We gave you a little bit of your day back.
There is a question about where do you put the code? And it is in Canvas. Go ahead, Kate.
Yeah, it's in the Canvas system. Beth kind of described how to get there. I think there's something about an exit or something, and there will be a question, and the code is capital I, lowercase n as in Nancy, and D as in dog, 13. So it's like indicator 13. But so capital I, lowercase nd, 13.
And that'll be over, if you look over on the left-hand side when you log into Canvas. Sometimes I think you have to go up to, once you log in, go up to where your name is displayed up in the upper right-hand corner, and you could go down to Student Dashboard. And then you can click on your course. And once you get into this IEP course, over on the left-hand side, it's going to have, oh, hang on.
Yeah, I'm not familiar enough with it.
Just a minute. I can tell you exactly what it says.